talk about something that always seems to stir up opinions, tattoos. Body art has gone from rebellious counterculture to pretty mainstream. You see women rocking sleeves, little ankle pieces, full back tattoos, or tiny delicate ones tucked away where only a partner might notice. But here's the juicy part. Researchers have actually studied how tattoos affect the way women are perceived in dating and relationships, and the results, let's just say they're pretty fascinating. Now, before you get your pitchforks out, this isn't about shaming tattoos. It's about what studies show happens when society interprets body art. And if you're dating a woman with tattoos, there are some unique risks based on psychology, perception, and even evolutionary studies that you might run into. Let's break down 11 of them. Risk 1, she might be perceived as more sexually adventurous. One of the biggest perceptions floating around about women with tattoos is that they're wild in bed or more sexually open. It's such a stereotype, right? But multiple studies have shown that men often assume tattooed women are more adventurous, more spontaneous, and even more willing to try things sexually. On the surface, that might sound like a turn-on, but here's the risk: perception doesn't always equal reality. Imagine you're dating a woman with a full sleeve or a little tattoo peeking out on her ribs. Other men see that and instantly project fantasies onto her, sometimes approaching her with bold or even disrespectful assumptions. That can cause tension in your relationship because suddenly random guys feel entitled to flirt harder, push boundaries, or straight up assume she's easy. Not only is that unfair to her, but it puts you in situations where jealousy, protectiveness, or insecurity can creep in. Even worse? Those stereotypes might seep into your brain too. You might start expecting her to be this wild sex goddess 24/7 just because she has ink, and when real life doesn't match the fantasy, disappointment sets in. Tattoos don't define someone's sexual personality, but studies prove that they shape how others see her. So if you're dating a woman with tattoos, you have to be ready to separate fantasy from fact and love the person under the ink, not the stereotype strangers will attach to her. Risking 2, she could be judged more harshly by family or friends. Here's a scenario. You bring your tattooed girlfriend home to meet the parents, and the second she walks in with that gorgeous floral half sleeve or tiny ankle piece, your mom's eyebrow goes up. Maybe she smiles politely, but inside, she's wondering what those tattoos say about her character. And guess what? Science backs that up. Studies show that people with tattoos, especially women, are more likely to be judged negatively in conservative or traditional environments. That means if your family, your friends, or even your coworkers are the old school type, they might see her tattoos as rebellion, irresponsibility, or even bad influence territory. This doesn't just create awkward dinners, it can create long-term friction. Maybe your parents don't approve of her, maybe your friends make backhanded comments, maybe she feels like she has to constantly prove herself just because of some ink on her skin. And here's the deeper risk: you might get stuck in the middle. You love her for who she is, tattoos and all, but your family's subtle or not so subtle disapproval starts weighing on you. Over time, that pressure can chip away at the relationship. Suddenly, her body art isn't just her expression, it's your shared social obstacle. If you're not ready to defend her or stand by her proudly, this risk can be the silent killer of your relationship. Risk 3, people may assume she's less committed. This one comes straight out of psychology research. Tattoos are often linked in people's minds with impulsivity. When someone sees ink, especially visible ink, they subconsciously think, maybe she makes fast decisions without thinking of the consequences. And when it comes to dating, impulsivity gets tied to another big word: commitment. Now, here's the risk. If you're dating a tattooed woman, people might automatically assume she's less reliable in relationships. Maybe they think she jumps into things too fast, or that she'll jump out just as quickly. Even you might wrestle with those thoughts if you let stereotypes cloud your judgment. After all, tattoos are permanent, but they're often made in moments of passion, spontaneity, or rebellion. People think if she can commit to that, what else is she committing to or not committing to? But here's the twist: sometimes that perception can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If she senses you don't fully trust her because of her tattoos, that lack of trust can push her away. No one likes being judged for choices they made about their own body, and constantly having to prove commitment can feel exhausting. The real risk isn't her ability to stay committed, it's whether you can see past the tattoo and trust her as a whole person, not a stereotype. Risk 4, she may draw more attention from other men. Okay, let's be real for a second. Tattoos are eye-catching. They're like wearable art, little magnets for curiosity, and when a woman has them, people notice. Studies have shown that tattooed women actually get approached more often by men in bars and public settings. Now, on the surface, that might sound like a compliment. Who doesn't love a little extra attention, right? But here's where the risk kicks in. Extra attention doesn't just vanish when you're in a relationship. Imagine sitting across from her at dinner and the waiter suddenly makes a comment about her tattoo. Or you're walking together and random guys stop her to ask what her ink means. Cute at first, but over time that can stir jealousy, insecurity, and even arguments. Suddenly you're side-eyeing every guy who looks a little too long, every smile that lingers, and if you're someone who already struggles with trust or possessiveness, this becomes gasoline on the fire. Now flip it, she might enjoy the attention. Not in a cheating way, but in a, hey, people admire my art kind of way. And if you interpret that as her encouraging flirtation, tensions rise. See the pattern? The tattoos invite conversation and curiosity from the outside world, but you as her partner have to decide whether that's going to shake your confidence or not. The risk isn't that she's going to cheat. The risk is that you might feel like you're constantly competing with every stranger who uses her tattoos as an excuse to strike up a conversation. And if you can't handle that, the relationship starts feeling like a battlefield you never signed up for. Risk turn 5, she might be stereotyped as more dominant or rebellious. Here's something fascinating. Body art isn't just seen as decorative, it's seen as a signal. Research shows that tattooed women are more likely to be perceived as dominant, independent, and rebellious. Now, if you're the kind of guy who loves bold, fiery energy, that might sound like a dream. But if you're someone who craves traditional gender roles or softer dynamics, you could feel out of sync real fast. The stereotype goes like this: tattooed women are rule breakers. They push against authority, they don't care what society thinks, and they carve their own path. That sounds empowering, but in dating, it sometimes translates into assumptions like, she won't listen, she's hard to control, or she'll challenge me constantly. If you're not secure in yourself, that stereotype can feel threatening. Here's the deeper layer though. Sometimes she does lean into that energy. Tattoos can be an outward expression of rebellion, strength, or dominance. So if you're expecting a quiet, submissive, go-with-the-flow partner, you might be in for a shock. The risk isn't that she's too much, it's that you might not be prepared for someone who unapologetically takes up space and refuses to shrink down for anyone. And let's not ignore how others might treat her. Friends, family, co-workers, they may project this rebellious archetype onto her, even if she's a total sweetheart. Suddenly, she's the edgy girlfriend or the bossy one, before she even opens her mouth. And that social narrative, it trickles back into your relationship, whether you like it or not. Risk joint 6, tattoos are linked with higher risk-taking behavior. This one's straight out of psychology journals. Studies show that people with tattoos, especially multiple tattoos, score higher on risk-taking scales. That doesn't mean every tattooed woman is jumping out of planes or getting blackout drunk every weekend, but statistically there's a connection between ink and living life on the edge. So, what does that mean for dating? Well, you might find yourself in some wild, unpredictable situations. Maybe she's the type who wants to go cliff diving on vacation instead of sipping margaritas by the pool. Maybe she thrives on late nights, spontaneous road trips, or pushing boundaries you'd never cross on your own. At first, that's thrilling. Dating her feels like a constant adventure. But here's the risk: not everyone can keep up with that level of intensity. There's also the darker side of risk-taking. Studies link tattoos with higher rates of alcohol consumption, reckless driving, and even confrontational behavior. Again, not always true, but the probability is higher. That could mean drama, financial strain, or emotional roller coasters you weren't prepared for. At its core, the risk here is sustainability. Can you handle a partner who thrives on intensity, who leans toward the thrill of the moment, who might sometimes make decisions that feel reckless to you? Or will you find yourself exhausted, wishing for calm while she's chasing the next big rush? Because dating someone with tattoos isn't just about loving the art, it's about embracing the personality traits that often come with it. Risk Zemin, if she regrets her tattoos later, that can impact her self-esteem. Tattoos are permanent, but emotions aren't. The thing about ink is that it often represents a snapshot in time. A feeling, a relationship, a rebellious phase, a burst of inspiration. And as years go by, sometimes that art doesn't match the person she becomes. Maybe she loved that giant dragon on her back at 21, but at 35, it feels like an embarrassing souvenir from a life she's outgrown. Here's the risk. Regret doesn't just stay on her skin. It seeps into the relationship. When she looks in the mirror and sees a tattoo she no longer loves, it can spark insecurities. Suddenly, she's covering up more. She's hesitant in intimate settings, or she makes self-deprecating jokes that hint at deeper dissatisfaction. And when self-esteem dips, it changes the way she connects with you. Confidence is sexy. Regret is heavy. Even worse, if her tattoo is tied to an old partner or a wild phase, you may feel like you're competing with a ghost. Nobody wants to roll over in bed and see their girlfriend's ex's name inked on her skin. That kind of baggage can stir up resentment, jealousy, and unnecessary drama.
The long game here is patience. If she regrets her tattoos later, you'll need to be supportive, maybe even ride along for the emotional roller coaster of cover-ups, removals, or just learning to embrace the past. If you can't handle that, the relationship might crack under the weight of permanent reminders of temporary decisions.
Risk Sum 8. Other women may judge her too. It's easy to assume the biggest judgment tattooed women face comes from men, but that's only half the story. Female peer groups can be brutal, and women with tattoos often get extra scrutiny from other women. Research on social dynamics shows that women can sometimes perceive heavily tattooed peers as more competitive, more sexually open, or more attention-seeking. That judgment shows up in subtle ways. Side-eye at parties, whispers in the bathroom, joking comments about her being a wild child or trying too hard. And here's where it becomes your risk too, because those judgments don't stay in her world. They bleed into your social circle, your friendships, and your shared experiences. If your friends' girlfriends don't like her or she feels excluded, you're suddenly navigating social tension every time you go out. Even in professional environments, women sometimes face harsher judgment from other women for tattoos. If she's constantly under a microscope, that stress can follow her home. And you'll feel it too, because when she's frustrated, exhausted, or withdrawn from being judged, your relationship absorbs that energy. The risk isn't that she's unlikable. The risk is that other women may project jealousy, insecurity, or cultural biases onto her, and you'll have to decide whether you're strong enough as a couple to rise above the gossip. Risk 9, she may be perceived as more likely to cheat. This one stings because it's so unfair, but it's real. Multiple studies have shown that tattooed women are perceived as being less faithful, more impulsive, and more likely to stray. Now let's be clear, there's no direct link between tattoos and cheating. Cheating is about character, not ink. But the perception, that's powerful. Here's how it plays out. Your buddies might warn you that your tattooed girlfriend is a heartbreaker. Strangers might assume she's down for casual flings. Even you might wrestle with intrusive thoughts when she goes out with friends, because society has planted the seed that tattoos equal disloyalty. That perception can create a toxic cycle. If you don't fully trust her because of stereotypes, she'll feel controlled, doubted, and disrespected. And ironically, that lack of trust can push her away. Relationships thrive on faith and confidence. Without them, suspicion eats everything alive. The real risk isn't her fidelity, it's how much stock you put in the world's judgments. If you let stereotypes whisper in your ear, you'll sabotage your own happiness. But if you can rise above and trust her character over her ink, that's where the relationship survives the noise. Risk 10, tattoos can limit career opportunities. Even though tattoos are way more normalized today than they were 20 years ago, stigma still exists, especially in conservative or traditional industries. Studies have shown that people with visible tattoos are judged as less professional, less competent, and even less trustworthy in certain job fields. That doesn't mean it's fair. It just means bias is alive and well. So what's the risk for you when you're dating a woman with tattoos? Simple, her career path might look different than you expect. If she's covered in ink, she may face extra hurdles in corporate jobs, education, healthcare, or anywhere that prioritizes professional appearance. That could affect her earning potential, her stress levels, and even her sense of fulfillment at work. And when someone feels stifled or underestimated in their career, that frustration doesn't stay at the office. It spills into the relationship. There's also the social angle. Maybe your parents or colleagues expect you to be with someone who fits a polished, traditional mold. And when your partner shows up with visible tattoos, judgments can fly. Suddenly you're defending her, not because of her talent or personality, but because of artwork on her body. That can get exhausting. Here's the truth, tattoos don't automatically equal poor career choices. Plenty of tattooed women thrive in creative, entrepreneurial, or progressive fields. But if her dreams don't align with the environments that accept tattoos, she could feel boxed in. And if you're building a future together, you need to be ready for the challenges that come with navigating a world that still stereotypes ink. The risk isn't her ambition, it's the unfair glass ceiling society places above her. Risks in 11, tattoos are permanent, relationships aren't. This one hits a little harder. Tattoos last forever, but relationships don't always make it to forever. And sometimes the art she carries is directly tied to people or phases that no longer exist in her life. Maybe she has a matching tattoo with an X, a quote from a phase of life she's outgrown, or symbols that don't hold the same meaning anymore. The risk for you is emotional. Imagine being intimate and seeing another guy's name etched into her skin. Even if she insists it means nothing now, it can feel like you're competing with a ghost that's permanently branded on her. Or maybe her tattoo represents wild, reckless choices she no longer stands by, and every time you see it, you're reminded of a version of her she's trying to leave behind. It's also about change. People evolve, but tattoos don't. And sometimes those permanent marks don't line up with who she becomes. That can create friction if you feel like the art on her body doesn't match the life you're building together. Now, this doesn't mean tattoos doom relationships. Far from it. But the permanence of ink is something you'll have to accept if you date a tattooed woman. Her past, her choices, her symbols, They're all part of her. If you can't embrace that, resentment builds. The real risk isn't the tattoo itself, it's whether you have the emotional maturity to love her as a whole person, ink and all, without trying to erase the marks of her past.